Thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast series, where we profile those who have overcome or those who are in the process of overcoming any life topic. We have 3 objectives with this podcast series. Our first objective is we want you to know that whatever you're experiencing in life, whatever you're encountering, you're not alone. We want to join you to let you know that we together can help you through whatever challenge you may have that at the time may seem too difficult to be able to overcome. Our second objective is to help you determine with a very confident resolve there are multiple solutions, multiple factors involved in any life encounter. It's a matter of thinking into and thinking through the life situation you are encountering to determine the various options, the various solutions that are available to you. Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If whatever you're experiencing is a result of a decision you made sometime in the past, such that if you had a life redo, you would make a different decision, we want to help you determine the objective facts and factors to evaluate to help you reach a more informed decision. I'm Ron Cooper, founder of the Cooper Culture. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty. Together, we are the Cooper Culture, and the Cooper Culture is sponsoring this podcast series. Today, we feature Tricia Roos, who has a compelling story for our listeners about her daughter, Annabelle, who was born December 29th, 2015, but lived only 6 days because of having a 2-chamber heart. That death, albeit was very traumatic in her and her husband's life, ended up being very meaningful that over a period of time, she was able to gain meaning through all of this. Marty, very emotional testimony, but what can our listeners gain from this podcast?
Ron, Tricia had a powerful message regarding a person that is hurting, a woman that's hurting from a struggle, from a loss, whatever it may be. Don't be afraid to reach out to them. Sometimes we don't know how to talk to someone that's lost a loved one because we don't want to bring up hurt. But the most important thing you can do for someone like that is talk to them, send them a text, call them, or just sit beside them as they go through their emotions. Listening and being there for them is huge comfort to those people hurting.
Let's listen together to Tricia's powerful testimony. Tricia, thank you so much for joining us. Our listeners are going to be very interested in your background, some life challenges, if that's an appropriate term, or just some things that you have encountered in life. And it sounds as if you've chosen to overcome those things and that you're not a victim, but rather you've developed a mindset of overcoming, and our listeners are going to be very interested in your story. Tricia, I tell people all the time, everybody has a story someone needs to hear, but I think you've got a life story that is going to be very interesting to our listeners, and we're looking forward to just listening to your story, and there's a very good possibility there are going to be multiple topics that our listeners would be interested in. But thank you for joining us, Tricia.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Tricia, where would you start? You had a childbirth that was a part of your physical makeup and so forth, but could you take us through that and some of the life encounters that you encountered and how you overcame some of those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually recently published a book. It's called When Wishes Change. And the basis of the story in the book is that in 2014, my husband and I decided we wanted to have a second child. And as soon as we found out we were pregnant, we did the normal, go into the doctor's office, make sure everything is okay. And everything appeared to be fine. However, at the end of the visit, she actually asked me if I wanted to do a blood test to reveal the gender of the baby. And I said, yes, I'm a planner. I just really wanted to know so that I could plan ahead. But about 10 days later, I received a call, and not only did the blood test tell gender, which was a girl, but it also told us that she had trisomy 18, which in medical terms, it's considered incompatible with life. Most of these babies have severe heart conditions and other issues. And statistically, it's only about a 10% chance of making it full term. So we were faced with a decision. We were actually recommended to abort the pregnancy. And I think for me, I've been an athlete my whole life. I'm a very successful volleyball coach for a living. And I was always taught that you don't give up. And in this particular situation, I felt like it was important for me to see this through and for us spiritually just to let God's story be told and not our own. And so we made a very quick decision that we wouldn't do that. And within about a week, volleyball season started. And so I knew I needed to communicate the message about my pregnancy and just let everybody know what was going on so that I wouldn't have to relay, hundreds of separate conversations with other people. And in that journey, my volleyball team, my high school volleyball team, just rallied behind us. And it was almost like, they were playing for a higher purpose. They were playing for her and for us and for making this, a better experience and not as sad. And so my team actually won the 2014 state championship in Texas in Annabelle's honor. That was our daughter's name. And then about a month and a half later, she was born alive, and we were basically told that was not possible because she had a 2-chamber heart. And then she proceeded to live 6 days. And, although she still passed away and we knew that that would be something that would happen, I feel like going through that experience really taught me a lot about perseverance. And I learned a lot about my faith and really just also having a community to rely on and to rally around, because there's situations in life that you cannot go through alone. You might want to, and you might want to close the door and lock it and not let anyone in. But I really had to be open to allowing others into our lives and into our situation, allowing them to be there for us, bring meals for us. And as a very independent person, that's not my nature. I like to handle things myself and be in control of all my life situations. And so I think going through that, and now it's been, several years, we were able to just change our thinking in the way that we were overcoming obstacles. And it was honestly a great experience. I mean, it's crazy to say that it was a good experience losing a daughter. And of course, we grieved and it was sad and it was very difficult, but we got through it. And now we have another child, Andy, another little girl. We talk about our daughter Annabelle all the time in our family. So she's still a part of our lives, but it definitely changed our perspective of a lot of things.
Take us back when the first diagnosis, the blood test, and you were faced with the decision that, all right, the medical diagnosis is this pregnancy may not turn out. You were advised to abort, and I want to tell our listeners and you, Tricia, Marty and I are faith-based, and that can be almost a euphemistic term. Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior. In him we put all of our hope because of what he did for us on the cross. Can you work us through just how you processed this? Did life almost come to an end for some amount of time, hours or something of that nature? How did you process all that?
Oh, it happened so quickly. So when I actually received the call from the doctor's office, I was in Portland, Oregon at a work conference. And so not only was I a high school volleyball coach, but I was also the director of admissions at a large Catholic school. And so it's very rare that I go out of town for work conferences, maybe once every 3 years. So this happened to be my 1 week of, professional development out in Portland. And I remember I was in this very busy, loud lunchroom. We were on our lunch break when I received the call. And as my doctor called, I knew that the tone was serious. Especially with the gender reveal, it's supposed to be very exciting and fun. And I knew that there was more that she was trying to tell me. And as soon as she told me that your baby has trisomy 18, I said, okay, well, how do we fix that? What can we do? And she said, there's not a cure. This is a fatal condition. And I remember hearing that, and I was walking out of the busy room, and it was almost like time stood still, and I just like my mind was racing of like, what did she just say? I don't understand how that is possible. And I ended up literally collapsing by a tree by this field. And one of my coworkers that I was supposed to go to the next session with realized he didn't know where I was and I wasn't with him. And so he actually came down and found me. And from there, a lot of people just came together, got me in a taxi, left my bags at the hotel for other people to bring home. And I just got on flights to get home as quickly as possible. You know, the next morning we had an appointment with a specialist to confirm the diagnosis because sometimes there are false positives. And he very quickly confirmed it. And, you know, I think sometimes with doctors, it's just what they do, right? They, like, if you're a specialist and every day you're giving people bad news, it's easy to perhaps lose that bedside manner and compassion. And this particular doctor really didn't have that with us. And, you know, his medical recommendation is move on. Don't you want to have a sibling for your child? Just get on to the next pregnancy. It was very difficult to hear that and for someone to just dismiss her life as if it was, you know, broken and it wasn't worth the time and the effort. And even now, my son does have another sibling that he loves and they're very close. And, you know, we still were able to have another child, even though we still gave Annabelle life and got through that entire pregnancy with her. But, you know, what ended up happening was because this happened on the first day of the conference and I had blocked off my entire week to be gone in Portland, my schedule was clear. I was able to get home. And probably I got the call on a Monday, probably from Tuesday through Sunday. I mean, we just cried. We just grieved. We just didn't know what to think. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know who to call. And it finally just started processing. I have to get through this. I have to be strong. I'm a role model to these teenage girls. They have to see me persevere like I ask them to do on a daily basis in practice. And so we started the season basically the next week. It was kind of a boot camp prior to the season. And I just decided by Sunday that tomorrow I'm going to walk in the building to work and I'm going to be strong and I'm going to, you know, do everything I can to prove that I'm a fighter and that I'm going to get through this to try to be a role model for my team. So I think just being a coach and knowing that I had teenage girls that were looking up to me, it probably forced me to be a little bit stronger than I probably would have been without them.
The way I'm processing what you're saying, Tricia, is several things come to mind. One, your values. You value life as Marty and I do. Abortion is, while it's a word, we would never consider that. We don't place a lesser value on anyone's life in any state of gestation. So that is Marty and I, and I'm sensing you're the same way. But
Absolutely.
I'm sensing also that what helped you through what was a very difficult time in your life is relationships. And is that a lot of how you were able to process this, Tricia, that is some devastating news, but you value life, and I just sense that a part of valuing life is relationships, and those relationships, those people who cared enough about you to find you by the tree, and yep, Tricia, we'll take care of your luggage and everything else. It sounds as if maybe all of that had a part in you being able to process this devastating news.
Yeah, I think as a woman, and maybe this is a little stereotypical, but it's like I have to talk it through. I have to hear other people's experiences. And part of my processing was finding others that I could talk to and relate to. One of my first calls was my best friend in college actually had a baby that died at 3 months old, and it was SIDS. So she just put her to bed, and then a few hours later checked on her, and she wasn't breathing. And I think for so many of us, when you go through a situation like a tragedy, you need your community and your people around you, but you also need people that directly can relate to you and understand the loss of a child, or, you know, if you lost your father suddenly, maybe someone else that lost a parent suddenly, or a grandparent, or whatever it is, whatever you're going through. And so it was a combination for me. I needed my people, like my close network of friends and family, to rely on and talk to and work through the situation. But I also very quickly was in search of someone like me. And so we had a good friend through my husband's work that actually knew another person named Allison that had a trisomy 18 baby, and her baby died after a few months. And I just needed someone like that. So I immediately got her phone number, and I just remember half of the time we were both just crying together because she knew my pain and I knew that she could understand me. But it was really helpful to talk to somebody that was, if you will, on the other side. So her daughter had passed away. It had been a few years. And so she walked me through her finding out the same diagnosis, the same call from her doctor, her daughter's life and the struggles and the joy and the beauty of it, even though she died, and then where she was in that moment in time, which was still processing, still grieving. But I heard someone tell me, on the other end of this, it's going to be okay. And I think that was really valuable for me to seek out others in a very similar situation besides just my friends and family, because, my best friends could console me and bring meals, but they hadn't gone through the same exact experience. And I just needed more people like that to talk to. Personally, that's just how I process.
You impress me as being a very strong-willed lady, albeit this is a very difficult time in your life. Marty experienced a miscarriage, which has some similarities, but Tricia, help the person, the listener, who is saying, I don't know that I can even reach out to another person like as you did. And how would you approach that person, the need for or the benefit of reaching out to someone else who is, as you described it, on the other side? But again, that person may be thinking, that's not me. That's not my style.
Well, I think the key word is perspective, and getting other people's perspective can help you come to a better place with your grief or with handling a situation. And, for me, sometimes it's not exactly what I want to hear. I remember the first time I was pregnant with my son, and that pregnancy went really well. I wanted to know from everybody, what is birth like birthing a child, and what's a C-section like if I had to go through that. Because for me personally, I think that preparing your heart and your mind for what you're about to go through, if it's possible, or what you are going through, is very therapeutic, and it really just prepares you for the worst case scenario, the best case scenario. You're just not as surprised if you hear other perspectives. So although it might be really hard to think about reaching out to others, I do think in the long run, no matter how hard that conversation might be, hearing what you're maybe about to go through, or sometimes it's just going to be, you're going to hear something that's difficult. You may hear from somebody, I couldn't get out of bed for 6 months. I was so depressed and I had to get on antidepressants. I mean, you could hear a lot of different things, but in my mind, at least that prepares you for different scenarios. And then in your mind, you can walk through, well, what if that happens to me? How will I get that? So one analogy I have is that in volleyball coaching, or coaching in general, I research a lot of sports psychology. And, one of the main things that athletes use is visualization. So I remember I read this book talking about how Nolan Ryan, before a game, if he had a game on a Tuesday night, on Monday night, he would go through his head the entire batting lineup, and he would practice in his head what he would do, if he threw 3 balls and no strikes and the bases are loaded. And so, you would take a deep breath, and you would focus in, and you would trust yourself, and you would know, okay, I can get a strike right now. And I always saw tremendous value in teaching those principles to my athletes. Prepare for the best case scenario, prepare for the worst case scenario. And if we're down and it's game point, match point, what are you going to do if the ball comes to you? And practice that the night before so that you're ready if you find yourself in that situation. And I found a lot of parallels in my pregnancy with that, because I said, okay, what if I go through a stillbirth? What if she's born alive and she only lives for a few minutes? What if she lives for months? What if she lives for years? It was just better to think of those scenarios and work through in my head what I would do with each of those scenarios and how I would prepare. And I felt better equipped when I did give birth to her because I went through those scenarios.
Is someone within your circle of influence possibly being adversely affected by a life circumstance? This podcast is being recorded during a period of COVID. We're on the downside or hopefully the recovery side, but there have been some devastating effects. There have been personnel losses, job losses. There have been medical impacts, any number of things that can impact a person's life, and that effect has been profound in our life and possibly is a reason that we are having difficulty overcoming any of life's challenges. Tricia has a great message. She has, through a process, overcome, but we want to help you overcome any of life's challenges. While it may be difficult to believe that what you're experiencing right now may be almost impossible to overcome because the feelings are so raw, so near, and so fresh, but we can tell you through our experience, Tricia can tell you through her devastating experience, everything can and will be overcome in time. Certainly not in the context of having forgotten, but we're able to live through and pass on our experience to others. I hope you'll want to share this podcast with others who may be experiencing something in life that is very comparable to Tricia. She has a great lesson and experience to pass on. That is very well said. Tricia, the topic of mental health comes to mind, and it's a very applicable topic to some athletes. I'm thinking mental health in the context of, just as you were saying about Nolan Ryan, how are we going to work through whatever situation I'm in? Some people, it seems, and I'm not an athletic coach, but Marty and I are both life coaches with a local high school football team. And the mental game, the mental preparedness, I say the mental game, I don't want our listeners to think that I'm marginalizing anything about this, but the mental preparedness and your mental attitude toward life, the game, and so forth, that seems to be just huge in how you're going to perform. Will you be at your potential? And I do want to address this in the context of your follow-on pregnancy, but is mental health a part of this?
Oh, it's a huge part of this. And so one thing that I can say was very different was the way that I was grieving and the way my husband was grieving. He's a protector. He just wants to, help fix things and make everything go well. And because I'm that more emotional griever, I was crying a lot. I was processing a lot. I was talking to a lot of people. He wasn't. He really didn't confide in a lot of people. He was more just like, okay, well, you're upset over here. I want to make sure that the laundry's done or the dishes are clean or other stresses in your life are lower so that you can continue to survive. But what ended up happening from that is probably about 3 years after her death, he went through a very difficult time mentally and emotionally. It was almost like that weight he was carrying, and it was building, and it was building, and it was building because he didn't do anything about it at the time of her death. And I was. And I still also went through a period like he did about 3.5, 4 years after her death, where for some reason it just caught up with me and the grieving almost started from scratch for some reason. And I wasn't exactly sure why. But I will say that I am very independent, and I said I can do all of this by myself, the grieving process, calling people, listening to other, people going through the same situation. But I do know, and I write about this a lot in the book, that we shouldn't have done it by ourselves. That was probably our largest regret, was that at the time of her death, neither of us went to therapy, neither of us went to any kind of counseling to understand each other's grief and help us properly heal from it. And we just jumped back into work. We jumped back into life. We had a son already, and so we just put everything into him, and we didn't spend enough time on ourselves, and that caught up with us later. And I think because it caught up with us later, we both sought out some therapy and kind of almost had to work backwards from some of the grief. And I wish we would have done that sooner. And so now I feel like that's one of my biggest pieces of advice to people that I talk to is if you're really struggling on your own to handle this, seek out professional help. Obviously, people are trained to counsel others dealing with all kinds of different tragedies and grief. And it's not always something you can do on your own, nor should you, because if you're not an expert, you don't want to have to carry this burden and for it to catch up with you later.
I'm always after a call to action, and this is a great segue to that. In the context of grieving, you and your husband grieved in very different ways, and we know from experience that sometimes grieving is immediately following, sometimes it's as your husband, a number of years afterward. Is it, would you say, always appropriate, or is it appropriate for us as those who care about people, like people for you, who can empathize with what you're going through? Is it appropriate for us to reach out and encourage you to seek that help, or would you be offended by any of us who are not, quote, certified in grief counseling to even mention something like that?
Well, that's a good question, because actually the way that I got to a counselor was through a friend who had called to check on me, and after hearing some of the things I was telling her, that I was dealing with some anxiety and that all of the grief was coming back to me and I wasn't sure why, she actually suggested, and had not had children, had not gone through a similar situation whatsoever, but she said, hey, you know what? My church actually has a person that specializes in grieving parents that have lost a child, and I'd be happy to give you her number if you're interested. So it was not pushy. She listened first to hear what I was going through and how I was doing, and then she just offered it. And I think if it wasn't for her offering that, I wouldn't have sought it out myself. I just wouldn't have. And I didn't go to her church, and I didn't know she had a person right down the road that specialized in, grieving and helping parents grieve. And so it was great for me. I do think, though, the pushy approach, or I know better than you, I go to a therapist, you have to go to a therapist. Some people take that approach. That just isn't helpful. And so I think that first everybody just has to listen, and if they have a suggestion, or if you know somebody that's going through a hard time, check on them and just let them talk it out, and then definitely after you've listened for a little bit, make suggestions if you have them. One thing I always tell people about advice, like if somebody I know is going through this, what would you recommend? And I always say set a calendar, a reminder 3 weeks after, say the funeral or whatever's happened, the tragedy, to just check on them, because everybody is checking on that person right when it happens. And there's this big flurry of support, but it just starts dying down. And it's like 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 9 weeks, maybe 6 months. I try to check in and say, hey, just wanted to see how you're doing. I know it's now been 12 weeks, because it's just really important that that support doesn't just die off. Because, and in fairness, everybody goes back to their life. Everybody's really busy. You can't just think of all the people in your life who have lost someone and dealing with grief, and remember to check in with them, in those little points. But it's a great thing to do, to just set your phone a reminder and just send a text or a call and check on them.
Well said. One of the purposes of this podcast series is to encourage people to engage with each other. We want people to know we're not alone, that we care, we have compassion, we want to appropriately empathize, but we want to reach out and engage with others to let others know that you're not alone, and as you're very adept in saying, with some of us who like to talk, let's practice the art of listening and then adapt to that person And it's not the person who says you must do to whatever degree that is necessarily going to be the most effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just listening and checking in and just making sure they're okay. And I think on the other end, even if they're not okay and maybe they don't take your suggestion to go see a therapist or seek help, the fact that you just sent that text or made that call to check on them is very meaningful. Or, sending a card at the anniversary of a death or something that happened. Another thing that I think is interesting is that sometimes people shy away from either asking me about Annabelle because they are scared that it's going to trigger emotions or freak me out or something like that. And, we have taught our children, Cameron, who knew Annabelle and went through this process with her, and then Andy, who never knew her but knows she has a big sister in heaven. We've taught them to talk about their sister, and we have a birthday party every year for her birthday. And I think so many people that have lost a loved one, they want you to acknowledge them. They want you to remember them. And yeah, maybe it triggers some sadness, but over time, I think it transitions to just appreciation of knowing that, oh, you remembered. Thank you for saying her name, or thank you for asking me about her. And it's just, I know that's uncomfortable for people, and it can feel weird, on her birthday for people to sometimes shy away from us instead of saying, hey, happy birthday, Annabelle. We're thinking about you guys today. I mean, that means so much to us and our family. And yes, it is a hard day. It is a hard day every year to get through her birthday. And I'm sure that's going to be the same my entire life. But if no one out there reached out and said anything, it would feel extremely isolating. So even if that feels uncomfortable, I think anniversaries and birthdays of loss are really important times to check in and just let that person know that you're thinking about them on that day.
That is very important to those of us who have not experienced what you have experienced, to merely acknowledge that you have gone through that. And I think at least in some form, it's a celebration of life, albeit a short life, but it's, again, in the context of valuing life. And thank you for telling us that, Tricia, that we need to overcome whatever inhibitions we may have and do have the fortitude to engage with the person just to say that we're remembering what you've been through.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to say about that I think is really important that I've learned is, for example, when this was early stages, so on her first birthday, right? So December 29th, 2015, I wrecked myself by saying, would she be walking right now? Would she be doing this? Would she be doing this? And I would see other babies around town that were around that age, and it would make me so sad. And it's taken me years, but I feel like God really spoke to me and said, Tricia, she wasn't meant to live more than 6 days. That was her purpose, and her life had tremendous impact, and it's okay. And now when I think of her, I don't think of it in sadness of, well, she would have just started kindergarten or first grade, or she would have been on her first soccer team. I think you can get so lost in saying, this was supposed to happen. This was supposed to be my milestone with her, instead of just saying her life ended on this day. That was all she was meant to live, and it was beautiful, and it was 6 days, and her life will and does have as much meaning as mine does. But it changed my perspective when I thought differently, that was it. And, I had a cousin I lost from COVID, 41 years old, tremendously sad. But that was, the day God called her, and she's not supposed to go farther than that. And it's so difficult to wrap your brain around that. And I know my aunt, at every anniversary, every birthday, it's going to be difficult for her now. But when I decided, and it came to me, that she was only meant to live 6 days, and I should not go through all these milestones in my head and get lost in that, it kind of changed my perspective, and it made my grieving a little bit easier.
That is a very valuable life lesson right there, that none of us knows why God called her home in just 6 days, Annabelle, but thank you for the life you led. But Tricia, what you have told us and our audience is that you and your husband have grown through this. There are life lessons, and while we won't know possibly on this side of heaven, but God had a purpose in this, and it sounds as if you and your husband have reckoned to the fact that, yes, there was a purpose in this. You two have grown through this, and this may be a huge message, positive message to a lot of other people. And I don't want to presuppose that I have any idea what God's purpose was in this, but it sounds as if you and your husband have made the very best of this very disheartening experience.
I think so. And it's taken time. I mean, we're not perfect. We haven't done everything right. We still have bad days. And that's another thing that's important is it doesn't mean that one day you snap your fingers and you're happy and you're past it, right? I mean, you may never get truly past the miscarriage because it's a part of your story, and Annabelle is always going to be a part of our story. But I can say that I'm a happy person now, love my family, and I'm able to move forward and do what God is calling me to do, and it's not making me frozen in time and crippled as it did in the beginning stages of my grief. You know, I was able to process and get through it, and then we had some setbacks, kind of went backwards a few years later, and then we were able to step forward again. And so it's a process. I think grief hits everybody differently, and we never went through an anger stage. We felt very blessed to even get to meet her alive, and we're grateful for that opportunity. But we know that we're better people and we're stronger because of what we went through. And I think you can look back at any tragedy in your life if you've gotten past it and say, you know what, I became a better person from that, or I saw a better perspective on life, or I was able to help others in the same situation get through it and feel, you know, good that you were able to learn and grow from the situation.
That's a very positive attitude to pass on to our listeners, and you have experienced the very disheartening aspect of life. And we'll all remember December 29th, Annabelle, and albeit a short life, but it was very meaningful. And on behalf of our listeners, Tricia, thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for opening up your heart and sharing with our listeners that anything in life, albeit however devastating it is, we together, when we have compassion and show that we want to reach out and engage with others, we can overcome any of life's experiences.
Absolutely. And if you know somebody going through a situation, I truly believe God called me to write that book, When Wishes Change, to help others see that perspective on the other side of the rainbow. And I think it's meaningful for all of us that have gone through something. So I'd love the support of, you know, that book and helping others. That's what I believe my calling was in writing it, is helping others through their grief.
Thank you for that. And When Wishes Change, is that available on Amazon and virtually through any other bookstore?
Yep, it's available everywhere, and Barnes & Noble, and just online you can search and find it. And I hope it really impacts lives all over the world.
Thank you again for sharing, Tricia. We do appreciate it, and God's very best to you, and we look forward to following your journey through life. And thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Is anyone within your circle of influence experiencing anything like Tricia experienced? The death of a child 6 days after birth, predicted, but still the heartache of having to endure such a traumatic event in your life when your heart is just sold out to people and others that you just love life and you want to do everything you can to advance life. Are you possibly experiencing something like this, that it's difficult to go forward in life because you're having challenges overcoming these type events? Tricia can help you work you through what she experienced, how she overcame a very traumatic event. It was through counseling, it was through therapy that she was able to process all of this in a way that now she feels free to talk with people about Annabelle and the devastating consequence that had on her and her husband's life. It took time to get over this. It was a process, and there's still times, as she mentioned, that there are times that can evoke emotions, but she has a healthy self-awareness of these situations, and she's moving forward with life, albeit Annabelle's life is always dominant, preeminent in her life, and she, along with others of us, are willing to celebrate her December 29th birth, albeit it was for a very short time, but it was a very meaningful time in life that helped each of us preserve, process, and fully acknowledge and live out the sanctity of life that we each protect and we endure. If you're experiencing something of what Tricia experienced, please reach out to us. Marty and I are certified coaches. We can help you through different situations like this. Tricia is offering her services to help you through any of these anxieties, anything that may help you overcome past events to live the life that you are destined to live your full potential. I hope you'll share this podcast with everyone within your circle of influence, your Facebook friends, your LinkedIn connections, and let people know that you care about them, you want to help them advance through various life situations. Anything in life can be overcome if we reach out, if we have a circle of friends who are willing to help us through various situations. A lot of this is a matter of listening and processing information to where we can just be that partner, that person who wants to relate to and care about the person who's experiencing various life challenges. We hope we can warrant a 5-star rating on this podcast and the podcast series. We hope you will want to subscribe. We want to advance people through this podcast series, through our relationships. We hope you'll be willing to share with those that are within your circle of influence and help them advance through any of life's anxieties. We hope you will be willing to share any comments you have, either over the phone or in the comment section. Please call us at 410-586-1875 or send an email to ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, @thecooperculture.com. The desire of our heart is that we can reach out to you through a community of believers. We can come together and help each other overcome any of life's anxieties such that we can live our life as God has ordained us to live, and we can live at our full potential. Let's live that fulfilled life, and the experiences that He has allowed us to go through, let's pass those forward to help others overcome any of life challenges, anxieties, and any aspect of our life that may keep us from operating at our full potential. We look forward to working with you.